Have you ever had an experience you can't explain? Because I have, and I would love to tell you about it. So grab a drink, settle in, and welcome to Ghosts in the Garden, where I tell you my scary stories and scary stories other people send me after dark in my garden. Tonight, I'm just drinking water because I'm dehydrated. Back in 2012, my family and I moved to Utah. Our house in Utah had 7 bedrooms and 4 bathrooms, which was pretty normal because people in Utah tend to have large families. I need to tell you the layout of the house for the story to make sense. My bedroom was in the basement, along with a guest room, a bathroom, and a second living room. Our first floor had another bathroom and a guest room, our kitchen, and our living room. And the second floor had my brother's bedroom, my parents' bedroom, 2 more bathrooms, and 2 more guest rooms. I apologize in advance, there's people setting off fireworks, so this video might have a few cuts that it normally wouldn't have. When we first moved in, I was 15, and I would always call my best friend who lived in Texas because we obviously couldn't see each other that often. The only place in the basement that got signal was in the middle of the living room on the couch, and I didn't want to go upstairs because I didn't want my parents to know we were talking after midnight. I noticed as soon as we moved in, I started getting weird feelings where the hair would raise on the back of my neck when I would sit out there and talk to her on the phone. It almost felt like someone was watching me, even though I knew that nobody was there, but I still had the feeling to turn around and look. This went on for a few months, and I got used to it, and we even made jokes about the house being haunted. One morning, I was getting ready for school. My alarm had gone off. It was about 5 in the morning, still dark out, and I was just getting out of bed. What I heard I could only describe as my bedroom door being shaken on its hinges. I got out of bed annoyed, assuming it was my little brother playing a prank on me, and it had stopped by then, so I walked over and opened the door, and there was no one in the basement. I walked all the way upstairs to berate him and then realized that he was still asleep, as were my parents. I was honestly more confused than anything, so I went downstairs and continued getting ready for school like nothing happened. From that point forward, though, it was clear that something happened. About twice a week from that point forward, I would either be awoken by or hear, shortly after waking up, my door shaking on its hinges. I started jumping out of bed and running to my door to catch it mid-shake and ripping it open while it was still shaking to see no one on the other side. I told my family about this, but they thought I was just a 15-year-old who watched too much Ghost Adventures. As I started to get used to this, I brushed it off as maybe the house was haunted, but that was all that happened. Until one night I went to turn the lights off in the basement before going to bed, and I watched a shadow figure walk from one side of the wall all the way to the other and disappear as I was standing motionless. Keep in mind, this was the basement, so there was no chance that there was light coming in from elsewhere and casting my shadow in weird angles. At that point, I started to get really weirded out and really uncomfortable, and I started feeling that being watched feeling more and more. My mom came down to my room early one morning and asked me why I had just been in her room, and I had to tell her I hadn't been. I was downstairs getting ready for school. She looked at me weird and told me that someone had been in her room asking for Mom, when clearly I was in the basement getting ready for school and my brother was still sleeping. That was the moment she started believing me that the house may be haunted. I kept having experiences, hearing voices and hearing noises that I couldn't explain, but I started to get used to it because it never really bothered me. I had friends who would come for sleepovers and swear never to come over again because of things they heard in the night, but they would never elaborate more than that. It all came to a crescendo when I was showering one day, and my shampoo bottle went from one side of the shower to the other, hitting the wall next to my head. This was the first time that I had seen an object move without me touching it with my own eyes, and it was very clear to say I was very freaked out. And from that point forward, I would hear things moving in the basement at night, my door would shake more frequently, and my mom even felt someone grab her leg while I was sitting across the room from her. A couple weeks later, it completely stopped. It was as if whatever was haunting our house had just left. There was no more door shaking, no more weird feeling of being watched, absolutely nothing. The nothingness almost freaked me out more than it being there, because for over a year now, we had been used to all of these weird things happening. There was one final thing that happened, though, that confirmed to me it was not gone. It was just quiet. My best friend from Texas, who I used to talk on the phone to all of the time, came to visit. I had one more day of school that summer, and so I went to school in the morning, and my mom obviously dropped me off because I was 15 and couldn't drive yet. She was down in the basement, in the bathroom I used, and she said that she heard someone knock on the bathroom door. She opened it up, and there was obviously no one there because no one else was in the house. This freaked her out horribly because I had been telling her about all of the hauntings and how it had suddenly stopped. When I got home from school that day, she told me about it and was clearly very freaked out, and that was the last we ever heard from whatever inhabited our house with our family. I would love to hear in the comments, where do you think what was haunting our house went? Why did it stop? And why did it show back up for my best friend? This is one of those things in life I have no answers to and truly can't explain, and I would love to hear your thoughts. Since this is a new segment, I will have my email in the comments as well as linked in my bio, and please feel free to send me your true scary stories. I would love to tell them here on the channel. Thank you so much for tuning in with me in my garden after dark for Ghosts in the Garden. I can't wait to hear from you all and share your stories. Bye.
Want to hear something scary? Don't stay out at night. Don't run in the woods. If you hear something, no you didn't. If you see something, no you don't. I'm sure some of you recognize where that's from. Appalachian horror stories are some of my favorite, so I thought I'd start a new series reading people's stories. We had been in the woods since noon. Not near the road, not near some lazy little family campground with gravel pads and numbered signs. We were deep in Big Bradley country, where the trees grew close enough to swallow sound, and the trail stopped feeling like a trail if you looked away too long. I knew those woods. That mattered. I had grown up around them. I knew the way the ground dipped. I knew the creek sounds. I knew the difference between a squirrel and dead leaves and a man trying to move quiet. I knew how far a voice could carry between the trees, and I knew how dark it got after sunset when the last bit of orange left the ridge. By the time night settled in, we had already walked the area to death. 2 miles in every direction, maybe more. We checked the nearby clearings, followed little cuts through the brush, climbed over rocks, crossed leaf beds, and wandered until the woods had stopped feeling interesting and started feeling familiar. There was nobody out there. No tents, no lanterns, no distant firelight blinking between the trees. No other voices. No flashlights bobbing through the dark. Nothing. Just us. 3 tents, 4 men, a fire, a few drinks. The kind of stupid, comfortable laughing you only do when the world feels far away and you think you know exactly what's around you. Around 3 in the morning, the woods went quiet. Not silent exactly. The fire still cracked. Someone shifted in their chair. A bottle clinked softly against another, but the forest itself seemed to hold its breath. I remember staring into the coals, watching them pulse red under the blackened wood, when a voice spoke from the edge of the firelight. Hello? All 4 of us looked up. He was standing right there, not 20 feet away. Not coming down the trail, not pushing through brush, right there. Just outside the circle of our chairs, close enough that the firelight caught his face. A man, middle-aged maybe, hard to tell. He had one of those faces that looked unfinished in the dark, like the shadows were still deciding what shape to give him. No backpack, no jacket that I remember, no flashlight, no lantern, no headlamp, nothing in his hands. And he was smiling. Not big, not friendly, just enough, like he had been smiling since before we saw him. Mind if I sit? He asked. Nobody answered right away. This was the first thing that bothered me, not the question, the lack of sound before it. No footsteps, no leaves crushing under boots, no twigs snapping, no breath, no warning. He had crossed the woods in pitch black and appeared at our fire like he had stepped through a door. My boyfriend glanced at me. Clint's hand shifted near his side, casual enough that you wouldn't notice unless you knew what to look for. I felt the weight of my pew-pew at my own hip. I did not touch it. Yeah, one of us said finally. Sure. The man sat. He sat like he belonged there. That bothered me too. He did not act embarrassed for sneaking up on us. He did not laugh and say he hoped he hadn't scared us. He did not explain where he came from. He just lowered himself near the fire and looked around at our tents, our chairs, our cooler, our faces. Then he started asking questions. How long have you boys been out here? Just tonight, I said. His smile twitched. Been camping long? A while. You come here often? Nobody answered that one fast enough. The fire popped, throwing sparks into the dark. For a second, they looked like little orange eyes, lifting into the trees. He kept smiling, not staring at any one of us too long, but looking at each of us in turn, measuring, counting, taking inventory. His eyes passed over Clint's hip, then mine. There it was, a tiny pause. So small I might have missed it if I hadn't already been watching him like a snake in the leaves. He saw the pew-pews. I know he did. Something in his face changed, but the smile stayed. That was the worst part. His mouth kept doing this one thing while his eyes did another. For 15 minutes he sat with us. Maybe less, maybe more. Time felt wrong while he was there. He asked questions that sounded normal if you stripped them down and wrote them on paper. How long had we been out? Were we staying tomorrow? Did we know the area? Had we seen anyone else? But out there, at 3 in the morning, with no light and no camp, and no reason to be anywhere near us, every question felt like a finger testing a lock. We gave him nothing useful. We laughed less, spoke shorter, watched more. At one point, he looked past the tents into the black woods behind us. You hear things out here at night? What kind of things? My boyfriend asked. The man turned back toward the fire. The smile widened by a hair. Depends who's listening. The fire cracked hard enough that one of us flinched. Then, all at once, the man stood. No warning, no stretch, no sigh, just up. Well, he said, I better get going. Where are you headed? Clint asked. The man looked into the woods behind him. Not toward the road, not toward the way out, deeper. Just over that way. There was nothing over that way. I knew it. I knew those woods. No campsite, no road, no cabin, no easy trail that you'd want to take blind in the middle of the night. Just black terrain, drops, rocks, brush, and the kind of dark that turns every step into a bad decision. You got a light? I asked. He looked at me. For the first time, the smile left his face. Only for a second, then it came back. Don't need one. He turned and walked away. We watched him go. 1 step, 2, 3. Then the darkness took him. No beam of light came on. No crunch of leaves. No snapping branches. No fading footsteps. Nothing. He did not walk away so much as disappear, like the woods had opened its mouth and let him back in. For a while, none of us said anything. The fire burned low. The trees stood still. Some were far off, water moved over stone, steady and cold. Finally, I said, I hope he doesn't get hurt out there. Nobody answered, because that was the polite thing to say, the normal thing. The thing you say when a strange man walks alone into dangerous woods with no light. But none of us believed it. Not really. For weeks after, I watched the news. Missing hiker, body found. Search underway. Man injured near Big Bradley. Anything. Nothing ever came. No report, no name, no explanation. Just a memory that never settled right. Years later, I still think about him. The way he appeared without a sound. The way he smiled at the fire. The way his eyes paused on the pew-pews. The way he asked how long we'd been out there, like he was trying to decide something. People like ghost stories because ghosts are easier. A ghost doesn't need a motive. A ghost doesn't need to know if you're armed. A ghost doesn't sit by your fire and count how many of you there are. I don't know what we met that night at Big Bradley, but I know this. Whatever he came there for, he changed his mind. Do you believe this story?
The person that sent me the story called it the spirit who has followed me for years. And years is all caps with 4 exclamation points. By the way, if you have a story that you'd like to share with our glitch community about glitches in the matrix, dreams, aliens, cryptids, or the paranormal, you can send it to this email address. And remember, we believe you. Oh my God, I love your videos and get so excited every time I come across one. Yay! I've always said I wish I could share my story because it's creepy AF. Well, if you share or not, at least it will be told. So please sit back and enjoy and buckle up because it's a wild fucking ride. My misery is your entertainment. When I was about 6 years old, my parents had purchased this extremely old farmhouse in the country. I still remember the first time seeing this house. It immediately sent shivers down my spine. It sat up on a hill. It was dark, cold, and just all around unwelcoming. It needed a lot of work, but thankfully my grandpa was a seasoned house flipper / contractor, so he took that creepy old farmhouse, completely gutted it, and made it into something breathtaking. Even with the house being totally remodeled, it still always carried this uneasy feeling with it. The only feeling I can closely describe it would be that run for your life feeling you get when you're running up the stairs late at night and you swear something is chasing you. Now take that feeling and add it to every single minute of your day. No, I think I'm good. The first thing that I remember that was weird that happened in that house was one night I had woken up in the summer. Naturally, my bedroom window was open, and while laying there, I could hear rocks banging. Not like an animal walking over rocks, but it sounded like someone was picking up rocks and slamming them on top of other rocks hard. We had an old rock wall that went around the property line. I told my mom, and she said it was deer. Typical parent excuse, but it happened almost every night. I got to the point I would refuse to sleep with my window open because it woke me up every night. I then had a dream, what I thought was a dream, that I was pinned to my bed and the closet door that was right at the end of my bed opened and a huge black evil figure was standing inside the closet. I woke up the next morning and sure enough, the closet door was open. I put a toy box in front of the closet door and would refuse to open it after that. Yeah, good idea, good idea. I used to wake up to my jewelry box laying in the middle of my bedroom floor opened and playing music. This was a music box that you needed to wind up to play music, but I never did. I would always smell a strong smell of perfume whoosh past me. My grandma used to tell me it's just the old lady who used to live here. As a kid, that scared me even more. My mom was physically pushed out of a lawn chair while by the fire, and while she ran to the house, she was pushed again, and her teeth went through her bottom lip. My dad's hand was slammed in the dryer door and he swears that something pushed him down the basement steps. Okay, if we're getting violent, that is way past like woman who used to live here. I heard a little girl telling me it's okay once while I was scared out of my mind by hearing my parents screaming and my door slamming shut, only to find my parents sound asleep. I sat on my bed shaking from fear when I heard a little girl behind me say, "It's okay." No, I ran for my life down that hallway into my mom's bed. My mom told me, "You were dreaming," but I knew I wasn't sleeping. I just didn't argue. My younger brother, who was 6 years younger than I, who was only one when we moved into the house, swore that he had an imaginary friend named Jerfy. Is that supposed to say Jeffrey? Or it says Jerfi? I mean, why? Jerfy. Jerfy? He swore Jerfy was real. Okay, we're spelling it like that, I guess. He swore Jerfy was real and got extremely upset if we said otherwise. We would hear noises coming from my brother's room at night, and my brother would yell for Jerfy to stop throwing things. He said that Jerfy would keep him awake at night and even gave him a bloody nose once while he was sleeping because he ignored Jerfy when he was trying to go to sleep. When we moved out of the house, my brother completely stopped talking about Jerfy and even forgot about him until my mom and I brought it up in a conversation one day many years later. When we did, my brother says, "Oh my God, I thought that was all a fever dream." He said that Jerfy was a little boy who would play with him but also tried to get him in trouble by playing tricks. We later found out that a 7-year-old little boy named Jeffrey had died on the property in the early 1800s, from what it did not say. We used to hear big boot-sounding footsteps walk up the stairs late at night while everyone was in bed. Doors opening and closing, dogs scared out of their minds, even heard banging on the walls and floors. While our sister, 9 years older than me, babysat us one night, we heard banging on the upstairs floor, and we immediately thought that it was our dog wagging his tail or itching, only to look over and realize that our dog was laying on the other side of the couch in the corner. The banging came in threes. Bang, bang, bang. Oh my God, threes are bad, threes are evil. It stopped for a few seconds and then did it again. We stood right under that spot and all three of us just looked at the ceiling. My older sister tried to get one of us to go up and look. What do you mean one of you? The older sister should be going up and looking. All three of us ran out of the house so fast, no shoes, all lights still on, front door wide open. We jumped into her car and I remember looking back to the house while we pulled out of the driveway and the upstairs bedroom light flicked on. She said someone broke in. Cops called, house searched, nothing. Fast forward years later, I move out on my own, but I never stopped experiencing paranormal activity. I never put two and two together that something may have followed me. As a young adult in her 20s, I had moved a lot, and like clockwork, everywhere I moved, something would happen. At 19 and single, I just moved into my dream apartment. I loved it. One night while laying in bed watching TV, I hear this evil, guttural, demon-like growl come from my kitchen. I had a kitten that immediately jumped up and ran out to check, and she was hunched up, tail blown up and hissing. I check, and there's nothing. Once I turn the lights on, she calms down. Why is it that happens? Like when you turn the lights on, things just like disappear. I later get a boyfriend, now husband, and while I was at work one day, he said that he started to doze off on the couch. That type of doze off where you can still hear the TV and your surroundings. He said that he heard something come up right next to him, whisper his name, Ray, right in his ear. He even felt the air on his ear and his cheek, and then he heard bare feet run across the linoleum floor. That slap, slap sound while it ran, and then the bathroom sink turned on. I totally believed him. We totally believe him too. My husband is a country boy who did not really fully believe in the paranormal until he got with me and experienced what we have experienced in the 15 years of marriage. We moved again. I'm pregnant and my husband worked out of town, so he was gone for a few days of the week, so I was home alone. We lived deep in the country. One night I'm on the couch cuddled up with the dogs and I hear someone knock 3 times on the sliding glass door right behind me. The dogs jump up and bark and I run and check and there's nothing. No way anyone could have gotten away before I would have seen them. That's how fast I turned to look. Fast forward again. Here we are, 2 kids and in a beautiful home. We know the owners and we were renting from, and we had later asked if they experienced anything and they said nope, nothing for the 12 years that they had lived there. Our daughters at the same time were roughly 3 and 5. Our youngest would wake up nightly with night terrors. Some nights she would wake up and swore a little girl with long hair was standing next to her bed. She slept with us most of the time because she was so scared of her room at night. Our oldest was washing her hands at the kitchen sink when she looked up into the window and she saw a piece of her hair standing straight out like someone was holding it. She screamed and lost her mind. We as parents naturally tried to explain it all away, but in the back of my mind, I always kept going back to the same thought for some reason. It's the ghost from my childhood. One night, our oldest was in the upstairs bathroom. We heard a blood-curdling scream and her begging for help. We rushed up the stairs to find her shaking and sobbing. She said a man with no hair, remember that no hair part, peeked around the corner of the door. Peek-arounds are so scary. We check and naturally, nothing. Then the mimicking started to happen. This one scared me and scared me bad. As I previously stated, our youngest slept with us most nights. My husband / their dad worked nights at the time. We were getting ready for bed and I run back downstairs because I forgot water. Well, down there, I hear my daughter yell, "Mom, stop it!" I yell back up, "What? I'm getting water. I'll be right there." She loses it. I rush back up and she explains that she's seen me standing in the bedroom doorway, stepped back a bit, but she could see the light shining in my glasses and my hair was down and I was just staring at her, not moving or saying anything. I brush it off, check on her sister, and she's sound asleep. The next night, same routine. I'm in bed watching TV. My oldest yells from her room, "Mom, stop staring at me." I froze. I jump up, I run down the hallway, and I ask what's going on, and she explains, "You were standing in the doorway staring at me." Chills ran down my spine. Oh my God, me too. I was in fact not watching her. She says, "I could even see the glare on the TV on your glasses." Same thing her sister had said the night prior. I know for a fact she was asleep and did not hear the conversation, and I know her sister nor myself had told her about what had happened. Something was mimicking me and watching my children. This happened for a week straight until I finally saged the house. It stopped. I told my husband about it, but he just brushed it off. Excuse me, how are we brushing this off? How are we brushing this off? I think to save me from being so terrified, but I could see the look in his eyes when I told him. A wife knows their husband, and I know it sent a shiver down his spine. Okay, all right. I had to one night go into the dark, dank, scary basement of this house to check the furnace. While I'm puttering around, I hear a woman's voice whisper to me. I couldn't make out what she said, but I could definitely make out that it was a woman. My husband then tells me that he's heard it too once before. After 6.5 years in this home, we move again. Only this time it's to my mother's house, who had recently passed away. The plan was to fix it up and sell it. The way the layout was, one bedroom was at the other side of the house. You had to walk through the living room, through the kitchen to reach the master bedroom. So I was able to see if the girls were sneaking around in the kitchen or going to the bathroom. It was 2 small bedroom bungalow house. The girls shared a room. Again, only temporary. Anyways, one night we all just go to bed. We'd only been in bed maybe 15 or 20 minutes. I'm sitting up on the bed, talking to my husband, eating a nighttime snacky snack, and I see something. I fix my gaze and I see a shadow on the fridge. Looked just like someone was creeping / sneaking through the kitchen. Only it was weird because it almost looked like it had no hair. I immediately thought the kids, and I jumped out of bed, run like the wind, throw their bedroom door open only to find them both comfortably laying down in their beds watching TV. I instantly started questioning them. They could tell that something was wrong and they swore up and down, left and right, that they were not in the kitchen. I wouldn't have cared if they were, but I knew the shadow didn't look like one of my kids, and that's why I rushed the way that I did. A few weeks later, we're having a small little fire out back. My daughter comes in to get a drink from the fridge. She opens the fridge, turns to get a glass, and when she turns around, she says she sees a shadow with no hair, and the fridge door slammed shut. My immediate thought was weird that there's the same no-haired figure again. They would wake up nights hearing boots walking across the front porch. Remember me seeing the boots walking across the floors upstairs in my childhood home? Yep. Then one night, my daughter and I were watching TV, and I hear a woman talking/whispering. I turn to her and I say, "What?" She says, "I thought that was you." We both froze. There's the whispering woman again. 3 years later, we sell the house and we buy a new house in the country. We are only the third owners, and the original owners were still alive, so no ghosts, or so I thought. We haven't even been here a year, and so far, 15-pound mirror was lifted up off the hook and thrown down the hallway. Oh my God. What the fuck was that? Nope. Something just, I don't know. Something fell. I don't know. Scared the shit out of me. Okay. We haven't even been here a year, and so far, a 15-pound mirror was lifted up off the hook and thrown down the hallway. Our dog refuses to go down into the finished basement. My daughter has seen a black shadow figure, and she sees a bright light walk past her door at 2 a.m. We've heard weird noises, like something big falling, but finding nothing. My husband seeing a shadow out of the corner of his eye a time or two, and my other daughter the other night started screaming from her room for us to come. We ran in, and she is bawling. She says she was on FaceTime with her friend when she heard a deep, manly voice from behind her whisper and yell her name. The kicker, her friend on FaceTime heard it too. Her bedroom door was shut, and we were all still awake at this time. I am convinced whatever was at that old farmhouse on the hill has clung to me and followed me throughout all these years. It's been 29 years since I first moved into the house on the hill, and I still experience paranormal activity, only now it's bled to my children and husband. I've asked it to leave, tried blessing myself, family, and home, and even went to psychics, and nothing seems to work. Anyway, that's a long enough. LOL. Even if you don't share, enjoy the read. We did share, and it was long, and we loved it. And oh my God, how have you been living? You clearly have brought things from that house. I feel like you need someone more professional to help you. Like priest? Have you tried a priest? I know you've tried to, like, you went to psychics, but I feel like you need professional help. This shit is so scary. It's clearly the same entity. If anybody has any more suggestions for this person, please let us know in the comments, and I hope that you're okay.
6 creatures were cooking inside Alex's kitchen at 2:30 a.m. The funny thing was that wasn't the first night they heard people cooking inside the kitchen. Alex and his wife had just moved into that apartment only 3 weeks earlier, and almost every night they heard pots, opening and closing, plate movements, metal spoons. They even smelled stew, people cooking stew inside their house. So the first time it happened, Alex grabbed a torchlight and rushed into the kitchen. Nobody was there. The cooker was off. The pots were exactly the way they left them. His wife thought somebody was playing tricks on them. The second night, the same thing happened. The third night, the same thing happened. Soon they stopped sleeping properly. Every night, sounds returned. Every night, the kitchen was empty. And after they visited one spiritualist one day, the man just told them that they should just calm down. He handed them a bottle containing liquid and a small cloth. He told them to wash their faces with the liquid before sleeping, and he told them to place the cloth under their pillow. And he warned them that if they heard sounds again, they should not run immediately. They should just wait, then go and see who was cooking. So that night, they followed the man's instructions. At exactly 2:30 a.m., the noise started again. But this time, the sounds were even louder than before. Pots were slamming against each other, knives were chopping rapidly, oil was sizzling, water was boiling. It was sounding like they were cooking food for a party inside the house. Alex and his wife got out of bed. The smell of food filled the apartment, and it was coming directly from their kitchen. They walked slowly to the corridor, and the door was open slightly. The noises were coming from that kitchen, and Alex pushed the door gently. And there they were, 6 creatures standing around the kitchen. One was cutting meat, the other one was stirring a large pot, one was washing vegetables, another one was adding meat into the pot. Hey, the cooker was on. Flames were burning under the pot. These creatures were behaving as if they owned that apartment. None of them looked human. Their arms were too long. Their heads looked like they were twisted. Their mouths stretched from one side of their face to the other side. One of them now turned around and smiled. The wife collapsed immediately. Alex slammed the kitchen door shut, and then he ran for his life. He ran out of the apartment. He ran downstairs, and the compound gate was locked. Alex scaled the fence. He jumped that fence, and after only reaching the street, he now remembered that he has a wife inside the house. So directly opposite that apartment was a church. Alex rushed into that church. They were doing night vigil. He ran inside and people in that church also started running. They didn't even know why Alex was running in the first place. So the pastor now held him and said, what happened? Alex was pointing towards his apartment and he was telling them that there were creatures inside his kitchen. Most people thought that the fear has affected his brain. But the pastor decided to go and check. So he took assistant pastors and some strong church members. So together, they crossed the road. The apartment gate was locked. So they climbed over the fence and opened the gate from inside. When they entered into the building, they were still praying. So they found Alex's wife lying unconscious on the floor. Two people carried her downstairs. So the remaining pastors continued towards the kitchen. The noises were still coming from inside though. The sounds they heard had not stopped. The creatures were still cooking. So the lead pastor pushed the kitchen door open. The creatures were still there cooking and moving around that kitchen. One of them was now sitting on the kitchen counter watching the pastors face to face. Another one slowly turned its head around, far beyond what human neck should even be able to do. One assistant pastor just dropped on the floor and fainted. Another one ran out immediately. The rest of them backed away. And the 6 creatures stopped what they were doing, and at the same time, they turned towards the pastors and they started walking towards those pastors. The pastors ran. Nobody waited anymore. They did not wait for anybody. They started rushing down the staircase. They jumped over the fence, crossed the road. Some of them never even returned to the church that night. By sunrise, the wife had already regained consciousness. Neither she nor Alex went back to the house. They called their landlord and told the landlord that they were leaving. Landlord asked them, what happened? Alex told him to keep the rent, keep the furniture, keep everything. They only wanted to leave. Landlord was now quiet and now said, he finally said that 3 other families had lived in that apartment before, and none of them stayed even longer than 1 month. Nobody ever explained why they left. Alex and his wife never returned to that apartment to collect their belongings. Years later, people who lived near that building still talked about that apartment 3B, because some nights around 2:30 a.m., neighbors could still smell food cooking upstairs, and even though the apartment had remained empty for many years, now wow, things they happen.
This is called The Soft Play Phantom. The story I'm about to tell you happened when I was 6 years old. It was the summer holidays, so I wasn't in school. Me and my best friend at the time, Emma, were obsessed with animals, and we always loved going to a soft play farm called Farmer Ted's.
Fun. I love that. I want to go.
I've got one of those by me called Amerton Farm.
What's that? What animals do you have there?
Pigs.
What you got?
I love pigs.
I love animals.
That was such a pick-me girl thing to say. I love animals.
I want to hug them all.
I want to hug them all, but I can't.
But I
Can I
can't,
get free cat? For some background, there were 2 soft plays in the place. One was a lot bigger than the other, so most of the kids gravitated towards that one. Anyway, on with the story. It was around noon on a lovely summer's day, and my friend's dad decided to take us to Farmer Ted's for a day out. The whole ride there, all Emma and I could talk about was the soft play and feeding the animals. Once we got there, we realised that the place was packed with other families who were feeding the animals, so we decided to go into the soft play first, as the inside was pretty much empty. There were 2 soft plays located in the big barn that were full of bright plastic tunnels, big foam blocks and slides that seemed to go on forever. Did you go to soft play as a child?
Yeah, Snakes and Ladders, Sign Park, shout out.
Charlie Chalks was mine. However, mine and Emma's favourite part were the mini zip lines. This is quite a high-end soft play.
Go ape.
A lot of the children were outside feeding the animals. The soft play was deserted, not a soul in sight. Me and Emma quickly ripped off our shoes and ran into the play area. The soft play was located in the corner, and the walls of the soft play stretched to either side of the barn. This is relevant, trust me. We started off by just being crazy, sugar-wired kids bouncing off the walls and running around all the levels. After about half an hour, Emma has the great idea of playing hide and seek. After a couple of rounds, it was my turn to seek. Just to preface, I had quite bad anxiety as a kid and I didn't really like being alone, especially if there was a chance of being scared. 1, 2, 3, I counted out loud, pressing my face against the blue wall at the entrance whilst peeking every now and then to see if I could see my friend anywhere. Ready or not, here I come. I squealed as I quickly ran up the stairs and began to climb to the top level. I started looking around the top level and worked my way down, peeking around corners, calling out Emma's name and playing on the equipment as I roamed around. I made it back down to the bottom level with no sign of Emma. When I reached the far corner of the bottom level, I saw the zip line. I decided to play on it, swinging back and forth. That's when I saw it. As I said before, the walls of the soft play reached either side of the barn, but there was a gap. At the back was just empty space. No doors, no windows, just floor and high ceilings. Right there, in the corner, standing perfectly still, was a figure. It was tall, thin, and pitch black, like a shadow made of the darkness. It had no face, no clothes, no hands or feet, but it was the silhouette of a person facing straight at me. It had no eyes, but I knew it was staring at me. All the blood in my body rushed to my feet, paralysed in fear, as if Medusa was staring at me and turned me into stone. Time stood still, and God knows how long I was staring at it, and just then I heard a giggle behind me. Emma popped out of the tunnel I'd just crawled past, grinning proudly. You took forever. I was hiding in there the whole time. I grabbed her arm so tight my knuckles turned white. Without saying a word, I pointed to the corner and I managed to mutter, Luke, do you see that? No one can get in there. How is it standing there? Emma whispered with a tremble in her voice. We didn't wait another second. I don't know where it came from, but my fight or flight kicked in instantly. Run! Started to scramble through tunnels and jumping over blocks as fast as our legs would take us. We didn't stop running until we made it back to Emma's dad. Crying hysterically, we told him the whole thing, but of course we were only little. He didn't believe us. After that day, I never brought it up to my parents. I knew they wouldn't believe me either. Emma and I never spoke about it either. I don't think I will ever forget that day even 10 years later. I can still see that thing in perfect detail. But the thing that haunts me the most is although it didn't have eyes, I knew it was staring into my soul. This was honestly the scariest day of my life. I've never really had a big connection to the supernatural, but I've had a few incidents which suggest otherwise. Anyway, that's my story. I hope you enjoyed it, and if I heard this on the pod, I would literally cry of happiness. Love you both so much, and I hope you come to do a show in Liverpool, because I'd be the first to buy a ticket. Love, Isla. Well, we're not, but we are doing one in the Clapham Grand in London.
Person is saying that they were able to remote view Antarctica and detailed what they saw there. And before I get into today's story, it's disclaimer time. This is Spooky Scary Storytime, the series of allegedly true listener-submitted stories about the creepiest and most unsettling experiences that people have ever had. And I can't prove the validity of any of these stories, so this series should be treated as entertainment only. Take this with a grain of salt. I am in no way, shape, or form saying that this is absolutely true. I'm just going to read you what this person sent. I'm just sharing this because I thought it was interesting. And someone had left a comment recently asking if I had any Antarctica stories, and I searched my inbox, and this is the one story that I have involving Antarctica because we can't go there. You can go to certain parts, of course, on tours and on cruises, but there was an Antarctic treaty that was signed in 1959, which is an international agreement that states that Antarctica is a demilitarized scientific preserve. All of that said, I'm going to read you this email that was sent in to me. I will say also that this person sent this through a burner email through the form on my website, which basically means that I couldn't email them back to ask questions even if I wanted to, and they also used a very evidently fake name. So make of this what you will. But he said, this is shared strictly for storytelling purposes, and I'm not trying to prove anything, but I think the experience is worth telling exactly as I remember it, and use it however you'd like. I was trained to remote view. I'm going to leave out a lot of identifying details because whether people believe remote viewing is real or not, the people who trained me took confidentiality very seriously. I signed paperwork that technically still applies, even though the program I was involved with no longer exists in the same form. There are still people doing what I did, but they are operating under very different terms. First off, I was not recruited because I was a psychic. It was actually the opposite. I have a skill set that seems unrelated on the surface, but as it turns out, is very conducive to the ability to remote view. I'm sorry I can't go more into detail about that. When I was first recruited, we were taught that remote viewing was not supposed to be mystical like many people think. It was described as a skill, one that almost anyone can develop through disciplined training. We spent months learning how to separate imagination from actual impressions. Every session followed very strict protocols. You wrote down raw sensory data before your brain had a chance to build a story around it. Many sessions were incredibly boring. We were tested on whether we could accurately depict what was at certain coordinates, like buildings or objects or other landmarks. When I first started, sometimes I'd get enough correct that it was unsettling. Other times I'd be completely wrong. There was one target that everyone whispered about. As implied in the subject line of this message, that target was Antarctica. It didn't really start as an official assignment, which is actually what made it feel different. It happened during my 6th month of training. A senior instructor, I'll call Mr. E, was running a debrief after a day of practice targets. Most of us were already exhausted and ready to head out when someone asked a question about the weirdest target anyone had ever been given. Mr. E then told us a story about a prior viewer he had instructed who had an exceptional track record, who had been given random test coordinates pulled from a database. The viewer was not given context, just latitude and longitude, but said that the session had been so anomalous that the program began spot checking the same coordinates with other viewers over the following months. Mr. E finished by saying, we don't assign that target anymore, but when it does come up, we don't discuss the results with the viewers. The room was completely silent. He never told us what the target was, but of course when we left, we all talked quietly to ourselves when one guy I trained with said, I bet it was Antarctica. That made the most sense because there was no other place that they would not discuss. Of course, there was no way of knowing for sure until a few months later when I was assigned the coordinates. I didn't know where I was at first. The first thing I wrote down was old metal. I didn't know exactly what I was looking at, besides a lot of old metal that was massive and buried. There was no snow or ice. Then came geometric shapes that did not feel natural, like angles and long corridors descending deeper than I could comfortably estimate. It felt less like walking into a cave and more like standing inside something that had been intentionally constructed. Then something I still struggled to explain. I kept seeing what I can only describe as enormous gates built into the ground itself. They weren't standing upright like the entrance to something, but were flush with the surface, almost as if they had been sealed beneath the ice long ago. There was at least one set of circular gates and several sets of rectangular gates. They were definitely engineered, but I wasn't sure if they were meant to keep something out or to keep something in. Every time my attention drifted toward them, I got the overwhelming impression that they were not meant to be opened again. Around the same time, another image kept forcing itself into the session. A wall of ice that stretched farther than I could perceive in either direction that was unnaturally continuous. The only thing I can think to lighten it to, I think he meant liken it to, is the Great Wall of China. It just went on forever. My notes from that day literally say, boundary beyond this I can't see. I don't know whether it was an actual physical ice wall, my mind interpreting the edge of the target area, or some kind of mental block. In remote viewing, we're taught not to assign meaning to impressions while they're happening, but it stood out enough that I circled it 3 times in my notebook. The emotional impression was the strangest part. Every remote viewing session teaches you to separate physical descriptions from emotional overlay. The emotion attached to this place was a warning. It felt like, though I wasn't physically there, I was standing somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. I felt eyes on me, and it was the first time in all of my sessions that I did not feel alone. I couldn't see anyone else, but there was another presence which led me to believe that there were other assigned viewers in this space. I saw enormous doorways that looked too large for people and circular structures beneath layers of ice. I saw machinery that didn't seem powered on anymore, but also did not feel obsolete. Afterward, during debriefing, I expected the instructor to tell me I'd missed the target completely. Instead, he looked at my notes and sketches for a long time before sliding them into a folder and put it in his desk. He asked only one question. Did you perceive anything living? I said no. He nodded like he was relieved. We did not debrief, which is why I feel that my session was related to the location he had told us about months prior. In every other session, we were given marks on accuracy and told where and what we viewed. Others I trained with were given the same coordinates in different sessions, and we discussed among ourselves what we saw. None of us know for sure where we went or what we looked at, but we all saw similar things with what feels like remarkable consistency. Years later, I started reading about Admiral Byrd, Operation High Jump, satellite images, strange heat signatures beneath Antarctica, and stories about subglacial structures. Most of it is probably internet mythology, but I feel I've seen some of the things that have been discussed. It could also be my own mind being influenced to think that way. I honestly don't know. What I do know is that every time Antarctica came up in training, instructors became very careful with their words. When another instructor was asked about it, he simply said, "We don't train there." And after my session, I was never assigned those coordinates again. I'm sharing this now, years later, because something has been sitting on me heavier lately. I've watched the slow trickle of declassified documents, the growing number of scientists quietly admitting that there are vast subglacial lakes and unexpected geothermal anomalies under the ice, and the occasional blurry satellite image that makes even skeptics pause. I've also heard people discuss things that sound eerily similar to what I wrote and sketched in that notebook. Also, for what it's worth, I don't claim to have any proof, and I am not here to convince anyone that ancient structures or sealed gates lie beneath Antarctica. Most days, I still only half believe that what I saw was nothing more than disciplined imagination meeting suggestion, but the warning I felt did not feel invented, and that is the part that stays with me most. I'm sharing it because if even a fraction of what I perceived was real, then the decision to keep digging, and then he put in parentheses, literally and figuratively, might matter more than what we understand. And if it was all just my own mind playing tricks under strict protocol, then maybe it's still a useful reminder of how easily we can convince ourselves that we've seen the edge of the map. Either way, the impression hasn't faded. Whatever is there is keeping a secret. I don't know, y'all. I don't know. That was it. Let me know what you all think, and if you have a topic that you would like me to cover in a future episode of Spooky Scary Storytime, drop it below, and I will check my inbox.
Want to hear a ghost story? Kind of. In 1980, a British medical equipment engineer named Vic Tandy was working late in his laboratory when he began to feel uneasy. He was alone. He was tired. And then, gradually but unmistakably, he became aware that he was not, in fact, alone. Something was in the room with him. A presence just behind his shoulder. The temperature seemed to drop. His vision began to blur. He felt the first stirrings of a kind of nameless dread that no amount of rational self-talk is able to dispel. And then, in the peripheral vision of his left eye, a gray figure materialized. Silent, indistinct, hovering at the very edge of what he could see. He turned to look at it directly, and it vanished. Vic Tandy was a sober and skeptical man. He was an engineer, a man of science, an expert on information technology. He most certainly did not believe in ghosts. And yet, he couldn't deny that he just had what would, according to the authoritative clinical literature, be considered a classic haunting experience. In so doing, he at last joined the ranks of many of his coworkers, who had recently been whispering of their own unsettling, seemingly paranormal experiences, and speculating whether their lab was haunted. Tandy had previously brushed off these reports as the results of overactive imaginations, but his own encounter shattered his certainty. He abruptly left the lab that night. It wasn't until he returned the next day that he accidentally figured out the cause of the supposed haunting. Tandy was an avid fencer, and that morning he brought one of his fencing foils into the laboratory to repair it. He clamped the foil into a vise, then briefly left the room. When he returned, he was unnerved to see that the blade was vibrating. Not slightly, wildly, as if it were possessed. And that's when a light bulb lit up in Tandy's head. The blade was not possessed. The blade was resonating. Something in that lab was producing a sound or vibration at exactly the frequency at which his fencing foil naturally wanted to oscillate, and that resonance was making the metal blade shudder. Tandy tracked the source to a newly installed extractor fan in an adjacent room. After some tests, he found that the fan was producing sound waves at a frequency of approximately 19 hertz. That frequency is below the threshold of conscious human hearing. Most people can't perceive it as a sound at all, but it is, as Tandy soon discovered, almost exactly the resonant frequency of the human eyeball. When low-frequency sound waves at around 19 hertz pass through a room, they can produce a range of physiological effects that map onto classic haunting reports with disturbing precision. A vague sense of dread or presence, the feeling of being watched, shivering, cold sweats, altered heart rate and difficulty breathing, visual disturbances, particularly in the peripheral vision, where the vibrating eyeball produces ghost-like artifacts that disappear when you try to focus on them. Tandy had not experienced something supernatural. He had misread phenomena that was perfectly natural. Thus began one of the most consequential inquiries into the science of the supernatural to date. Tandy and his colleague Tony Lawrence published their findings in 1998 in the Journal of the Society for Psychical Research. They had, in essence, identified one of the first scientifically documented mechanisms by which an ordinary environment could produce a classic haunting experience for a perfectly sane observer. The fencing foil was the smoking gun. The fan was the culprit. The ghost was the symptom. Tandy went on to investigate other reportedly haunted locations using the same methodology. A medieval cellar in Coventry, regularly described by visitors as producing unease and apparitions. Mary King's Close, a notoriously haunted underground passage in Edinburgh's Old Town. In both cases, he found infrasound at or near 19 hertz, at intensities significantly higher than in comparable non-haunted control locations. These infamously haunted locations really were producing something. The something just wasn't what most thought it was. This is the central insight of the scientific study of haunting phenomena. And it bears stating clearly because it tends to get lost in the binary of real ghosts versus imagined figments of credulous minds. The experiences are real. They're not invented. Sane, sober, often skeptical people walk into certain spaces and experience genuine, distressing phenomena that they cannot rationally account for. What the science of haunting suggests is that the experience is not the question. The question is the cause. Take, for example, the case documented in the American Journal of Ophthalmology in 1921. A doctor named William Wilmer published an extended case study of a family he simply referred to as the H family. They had moved into a rambling, gaslit, gloomy old house, and within months, they began experiencing what reads, even a century later, as a textbook haunting. The mother heard footsteps passing overhead when no one was there. The family felt the constant sensation of being watched in particular rooms. Plants withered in the house and died. The children grew pale, weak, and lost interest in their once-loved activities. Mr. H reported the sensation of being followed by an unseen presence. On one particularly bad night, Mrs. H woke to find a strange man and woman sitting at the foot of her bed. The family consulted physicians, spiritualists, and finally, at the suggestion of a relative, a building inspector. The inspector found that the house's furnace, rather than venting up the chimney as intended, was diverting carbon monoxide gas into the living spaces. Carbon monoxide poisoning, in its subacute presentation, that is before the headaches and nausea become acute enough to demand emergency treatment, produces a remarkably specific set of psychological and physiological symptoms. Hallucinations, both auditory and visual, a sense of unseen presence, pressure on the chest, often experienced as something or someone holding you down, confusion, dread, the specific feeling that the room is wrong in a way you can't articulate. The furnace was repaired, and the hauntings stopped. The Wilmer paper is, in many ways, the founding document of the modern scientific approach to haunting phenomena, because it established, in clinical medical language, that the specific subjective experiences associated with ghostly encounters could be produced reliably by an entirely material cause. Carbon monoxide and infrasound are the most famous of the proposed environmental triggers, but they are far from the only ones. Low-frequency electromagnetic field exposure has been associated in some studies with experiences of presence, temporal lobe disturbance, dissociative episodes, and a feeling of unseen observation. Buildings with unusual electrical configurations, old wiring, particularly powerful nearby transformers, certain geological formations that produce natural magnetic anomalies sometimes show elevated EMF readings consistent with these effects. Mold exposure, particularly to certain neurotoxic species, has been linked to cognitive disturbance, to mood alteration, and in some cases, hallucinatory experiences. Houses with significant water damage and untreated mold growth have appeared in multiple investigated haunting cases. Sleep paralysis, the experience of waking with the mind alert but the body unable to move, often accompanied by hallucinations of a malevolent presence in the room. Sleep paralysis affects an estimated 40% of the population at least once in a lifetime, and again maps with extraordinary precision onto cross-cultural reports of nighttime supernatural visitation. And then there is the simplest and most powerful mechanism of all: expectation. Place a person in a building they have been told is haunted, prime them with the history of the place, the lore, the specific experiences others have reportedly had there, and their nervous systems will produce experiences consistent with that priming. This expectation effect is so powerful that it functions as a methodological problem for paranormal investigation itself. The very act of investigating a haunted location, with all the framing that involves, increases the likelihood that investigators will experience phenomena consistent with the place's reputation. The investigation produces its own data. But what I find genuinely fascinating about this body of research is what these explanations do not account for. Infrasound, carbon monoxide, electromagnetic fields, sleep paralysis, mold, expectation. All taken together, these mechanisms account for an enormous portion of what people experience in supposedly haunted environments. They are real. They are well documented. They are sufficient to explain a great many cases that previous generations would have understood as supernatural. They are not, however, sufficient to explain everything. There remain cases, well documented, carefully investigated, conducted by skeptical researchers using the full apparatus of environmental monitoring, in which the phenomena persists after every known environmental factor has been ruled out. This is the question that lives at the center of my novel, Disproving Kildane. My protagonist is a brilliant, self-assured, methodologically rigorous researcher who arrives at an ancient house in the remote Irish countryside with every intention of demonstrating that what previous occupants have experienced there can be entirely explained by environmental factors, social contagion, and the particular vulnerabilities of personality. He's not wrong about most of what happens. He is, however, working from a model that does not allow room for everything that is in the house with him and his team. As the data accumulates, meticulously logged, carefully measured, and painstakingly documented, he is forced to make a series of small, almost imperceptible accommodations between what his methodology will admit and what he is actually experiencing. Whether he's right or wrong is a question I want to haunt readers. Disproving Kildane is available now. Link in my bio.
Talk about something you cannot explain. Guys, this story is freaking nuts. The person telling this story was completely anonymous, so we're just going to say it was a woman named Liz. So Liz's grandmother called her and invited her over for food one day. And Liz decides she's going to bring her dog Coda because she doesn't usually go anywhere without this dog if she can help it. So Liz and Coda head on over and they arrive and they spend the whole afternoon with her grandparents. After a really nice evening, it was time to go home. So Liz goes to grab Coda, but she can't find him anywhere. She's looking everywhere, calling his name, getting more and more upset, and this dog is nowhere to be found. No doors were left open, the dog isn't in the yard, not under any chairs or beds, just gone. So after hours of searching, she finally had to make the sad decision to just go home. But her plan was that she was going to wake up the next morning, come back, and keep looking for poor Coda. So she drives all the way home, walks into the front door, and makes her way into her bedroom. Y'all, Coda was sitting there in her room on her bed, just wagging his tail looking up at her. The dog was sitting there like nothing had happened, and she was just beside herself. So in a panic, she calls her grandparents and she's freaking out on the phone. Like, what could have happened? Did he leave and walk all the way home? Like, how is this dog here in my house. She's racking her brain because this was miles and miles away, and when she got home, her doors were locked. So it wasn't even as though someone could have gotten in to let the dog in the first place. And her grandmother was also really confused because she knows Coda was there with them all afternoon. So they're both kind of freaking out about this. She even went into detail talking about how she remembers very clearly him sitting at their feet during dinner. And you know what else is really crazy? That leash that they brought Coda on when they entered grandma's, yet that leash was still left at the grandmother's house. So like, if they never brought the dog there in the first place, why would they have brought the leash? Also, everybody remembers the dog being there. So then listen to this. They even went as far as pulling up the home's security system. And listen to this. That camera footage showed them entering the house with Coda earlier that day. Oh my gosh, I have goosebumps. But there was never any footage of Coda leaving. This dog did not exit the house in the front nor the back at any point at all during that day. The dog went in and the dog did not leave. And somehow Coda was at home, safe and sound. This one was one of the craziest glitches I've heard. Also, I am very relieved that Coda is okay. All right, y'all, you know what to do. Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you have a creepy or glitchy story of your own, you gotta share it. If you're interested in creepy Storytime merch, the link is in my bio, and if you're new here, you gotta follow for more creepy Storytime.
I don't believe in the paranormal, but there's one thing my entire family saw that I still can't explain. Scary story time. This is a true story from when I was 5 years old. It happened during my cousin's birthday party in my backyard. We were all outside eating while my dad was grilling. My backyard was just a normal square yard with one tall tree in the corner near the fence. I'll never forget what happened next. Out of nowhere, my mom looked up into the tree and screamed. Every single person turned to look. Sitting at the very top was something. The tree didn't have low branches. It wasn't a tree anyone could climb, yet there it was, crouched at the top, staring directly at us. It was completely black with huge yellowish white eyes that almost seemed to glow. It looked vaguely human, but the way it was crouched and the way it moved didn't look human at all. I've never seen an animal that looked anything like it. The thing I remember the most were its eyes. They were enormous, bright, and looked onto us the entire time. I remember feeling absolute terror. Even as a 5-year-old, I had this overwhelming feeling that whatever it wasn't supposed to be there. My dad immediately yelled for all the kids to get inside. He grabbed a machete and ran back outside while we watched through the sliding glass door, crying. The creature never stopped watching us. Then, the moment my dad came towards it, it didn't climb down. It didn't even jump. It leaped. Almost like a mix between jumping and flying, it cleared the fence into the next backyard before disappearing. We called the police, but by the time they arrived, it was gone. The next day, we talked to our neighbors and searched for any reports, but nobody else had seen it. What's always stuck with me is that every member of my family described it as the exact same creature. It's the only truly unexplainable thing I have ever experienced. More than 20 years later, I still wonder what was sitting in that tree that night. And that's the end of the story. So what do you think was sitting in that tree? And has anyone ever experienced anything like that? Let me know.
Want to hear something scary? This is part 2 in my Appalachian Storytime series. This story may be short, or it may be drawn out. I am recounting these events as I type, as it was honestly one of the most horrifying things I have ever experienced. And it brings me genuine stress to think about. This happened maybe 2 to 3 years ago. I live in southern West Virginia, and have for my entire life. The woods and mountains surround every direction you look, and nighttime is a darkness that you can never dream of unless experienced. I was with a friend. I'll call him Mark. Mark was at my house one evening, doing the usual things, watching UFC, playing Xbox, etc. It was extremely late when we finally got bored and decided to go for a walk on a nearby trail to smoke a joint. This is not a particularly long trail, but it is very dense in the woods that surround it, and it is easy to get freaked out when thinking of your surroundings. We finally get to about halfway into the trail, about 30 minutes in, where we stop pack our joint, and stand on the trail to chill and talk. The forest is very alive tonight. There are always noises in the woods, but the amount of animal activity for the time was unsettling. At this point, it was probably past 1 a.m. This was a strange kind of eerie, but not as alerting as any sort of predatory animal in the area that may cause a disturbance. We finish smoking and continue our walk, when almost immediately, the forest falls dead silent. As soon as the forest goes quiet, there's a voice. It almost sounds like a mocking humanoid voice, shaky and uncertain, almost like an old children's toy, like the ones with the crackly speakers and robotic voice, if you know what I mean. This immediately sets us off. We bolt directly down the opposite length of the trail, but the sound does not gain distance. It doesn't get closer per se, but no matter how far we ran down the trail, this eerie voice remains the same volume, going over and over with no quieting or stopping. At this point, I am convinced that we are in genuine danger, something I have felt very few times. Finally, after sprinting for who knows how long, we exit the trail, gasping for breath, and almost on the verge of tears of how frightening this was. We began to exit the trail, and about 5 minutes from the exit, there is a bone-shaking, heart-stopping, murderous scream from directly behind us. I know what a mountain lion sounds like. This was not an animal. This was not someone playing or watching a movie. This scream sent birds flying from nests and made my heart drop into my stomach. It was the most genuinely depraved and violent scream that I have ever heard. This is a true story that I have only told to maybe 3 people, all of whom seemed to brush it off as false. I've never been a person to push for the existence of the paranormal or spiritual, but I genuinely believe that I encountered something inhumane in those woods. Edit. I know this will receive questions, such as what the voice was possibly saying, or to explain the area and what happened after. I genuinely cannot remember what the voice was saying, if anything intelligible. I don't know if I could understand it then, and I certainly can't recall understanding it after several years of blocking it out of my memory. All that I recall is that it was a fluctuating pitch, shaking, almost just joining sounds together. After running from the scream at the end of the trail, we ran to the car, which was only about 5 more minutes from the trail, so we got there relatively fast from sprinting. Do you believe this story?
Zombie movies got it all wrong. I pulled my hair into a ponytail, racked the balls, and was just about to break when Laura told me the news. Wait, you're infected? So the doctors tell me, but I thought you were vaccinated. She said 3 shots and a booster. Then how? I prayed that she was just like messing with me to throw me off my game. She said there's so many anti-vaxxers out there that the zombie virus keeps mutating and the vaccine can't keep up with all the new strains. Assholes. She said, tell me about it. You look okay. And she said the strain turns you slower, so it's harder to detect and easier to spread. I said, remind me not to split a beer with you. Or make out, Laura said. And I tightened the grip on my cue because Laura and I have always been best friends, but I've always wanted to be more, and I never knew how to bring it up. So I said and lined up my shot. And she said, so what? I said, so how long until you start craving brains? 1 month, Laura said, and I shanked my shot, skidding cue across the belt. I think I misheard you, and she said, you didn't. And I said, but that's, I mean, geez, that's so soon. I mean, that's practically now. And she said, I'm aware. How can you be so calm? And she said, because I'm already dead. There's no point in getting mad about it. And 1,000 things crossed my mind, but none of them came out. I used to love zombie movies, but I think they got it all wrong. Because in zombie movies, somewhere a siren goes off, and that's it. End of the world, you know, blink and it's over. But the real world isn't like that. It's ending so slowly that nobody cares. So all we can do is sit and watch it happen. right in front of us. Right as I was about to say something, right as I was about to tell Laura how I really felt, some loser from the bar offered to buy me a drink. I was not interested, and he said, "Don't be hasty. I even have a buddy for your friend. We could double date." Then Laura piped in, "We're gay, you idiot," which probably surprised me more than it did him, but he just grinned and said, "You probably just haven't found the right guy yet. I'll straighten you out." And look, I should have let it go, but I was overwhelmed, so I shoved him. And then he fell and spilled his beer, and then he started screaming, "You owe me a beer," and called me a bunch of names I will not be repeating. But then Laura said, "Here, take mine." And before I could even think, he just grabbed it and chugged it. He said, "You deserve each other," and then went to go annoy someone else. And then the tears started, and Laura asked what was wrong. I think I love you," I said in between my sobs, but I never had the guts to say it. And oh God, I wanted to kiss her, even though I knew it would literally kill me. She smiled and said, "I know. I've always known. Now let's shoot pool."
Have you ever heard a ghost story that gives you full body chills? Because this story is freaking me out a little to read out here alone. This story was sent in by Val. So grab a drink, grab a cozy blanket, and settle in for me to tell you a scary story out in my garden after dark. Welcome to Ghosts in the Garden. A few key points. My oldest nephew was living at our house. He was 11 when this happened. I was 18 and we lived in a bi-level. One night, I was having a dream that was blurring the lines of dream and reality. I was sitting in my bed looking at a tattoo I had just gotten on my arm when my door flung open and a tennis ball came flying at me, hitting me square in the chest. When I looked up, I saw a figure moving down the hall. So naturally, I got up and chased it as I thought maybe it was my nephew messing with me. As I ran down the hall, I saw the figure turn and began running down the steps toward the front door. As it turned, I heard something whisper in my ear, "No more noise." I followed it down to the front door and ran downstairs to the basement. When I got to the landing by the front door, I heard it again but louder. No more noise. As I ran down into the basement, I saw the shadow was no longer running but was waiting for me. I saw the shape of a tall silhouette of a man wearing a top hat with glowing red eyes. I slowed down as I entered the basement, and he took a step toward me, put his hand on my shoulders, and screamed in my face, "No more noise." At that point, I woke up, but I was in my bed and I couldn't move. I looked around, and at the foot of my bed was the silhouette. I panicked and threw all of my strength into my legs and kicked as hard as I could, putting a hole in the wall. I always slept with my bed pushed up against the wall. The silhouette vanished, and I laid there and closed my eyes and counted to 10. As I got to 6, I could hear my nephew in the room across the hall talking in his sleep. He kept saying, "Stay back, wait, and leave me alone." I hopped out of bed and ran into his room and started shaking him awake. When he opened his eyes, he just stared at me, and I asked what was wrong. He said, "The man with the hat was chasing me, and I couldn't move my legs to get away." My parents were finally awake at this point and came rushing in asking what was going on. We both told them our stories, and my dad simply walked out of the room, went to the kitchen, and began making breakfast. It was about 4 a.m. at this point, and my mom sat on the bed and tried to put my nephew at ease. He fell back asleep, and I went to the kitchen to eat with my parents. While we were eating, both of them took turns telling me stories of their experiences with the man in the hat. Apparently, the entire time that they had lived in that house, the man with the hat had been making his presence known to my parents and my older siblings. Always the same man, and he turned my father from a hardcore skeptic into a believer. Since then, a few of my oldest friends have seen him or dreamt about him whenever they would stay over, causing a few to stop sleeping over altogether. I took to calling him Malachi, and even to this day, when I go back to Pennsylvania, I will feel or see him in my dreams or physically, always in the morning hours, but it always happens when I'm in my childhood home. My mom has had the house cleansed 3 times and finally gave up when she realized he wasn't going anywhere. I don't know about you guys, but I would not be able to sleep having an entity like that visiting me every night in that house. I would love to hear in the comments, who do you think Malachi is, and why does he show up to them every time they're in the house? If you have a ghost story, a story about a creature, or a story you just can't explain, I would love to hear from you. My email is below and in my bio, and I can't wait to tell more of your stories here. Thank you for tuning in tonight, and I will see you here back in the garden on another dark night for another story. Bye.
This video right here is the proof that some people can simply not be scared. Because what do you mean you have this scary creature right here, a mimic, call it whatever you want to call it, in your room, and you decide to react like this? It all started when a guy woke up to strange noises around 5 a.m. The first thing that he did when he heard the noise was turning the lights on, and then he started filming. In the video you can hear strange noises coming from that room, like something is going on over there. As expected, that was exactly the case, because the moment he changed the angle and the door opened a bit, you can see that something is over here. It was screaming like in a weird and a strange way, and it even tried to attack him by throwing something on him. Now at this point, every human being like you and me would have already left the house, I don't know, screamed, did something, act scared, but this guy is built different because he decided to face whatever was going on over there. Yes, he literally decided to enter the room and see what happens. So he got closer to that room and he was trying to intimidate the creature by screaming louder. Like, yes, it's not the creature scaring him, it's him scaring the creature. When he entered the room, he immediately turned the lights on, and to his surprise, that thing disappeared like it never existed. I'm starting to think that this is the move right here. If you see something scary one day, act like you're not scared and go face it. Don't blame me if you leave this life though, because I'm not the one who recommended this shit.
5:20 de la mañana, gente. Está empezando a amanecer. Miren lo que es. Miren, ahí está el reloj. Y para los que no creían en la Llorona, miren, me desperté por los lamentos de esta. Pero no vinimos acá para estar teniéndole miedo. Venimos a darle al fandom lo que siempre busca. Mamoncita, no, mamoncita. ¿Con que te vas a venir a esconder? No te piando. No. ¡Nerviosa! ¿Dónde estás? ¿Salí? De donde quieras que estés, maldita. ¿No te das cuenta que ya nos cansaste con los pelos parados? Siempre lo mismo. Acá, se escuchó el ruido. Espectro. Baboso.
Imagine it's well after midnight, and you're walking along a lonely road in southern New Jersey. Your car has broken down, your phone has no signal, and your only option is to walk to the next town. Your headlights stream across the asphalt, shining with fresh rain, and the moon is a thick, bright wedge above you. Either side of you stretches the Pine Barrens, acres and acres of forest, marshland, and meandering streams. The trees are so thick, they look like a wall of giants standing shoulder to shoulder. Your headlights pick out the first few rows before the light is swallowed whole. Then comes a sound, a scream. It's just a fox, you tell yourself, or an owl. But then it comes again, and it's like nothing you've ever heard. It's high-pitched and guttural all at once. A child, a beast. You spin backwards, considering retreating to your car, before you force yourself to turn again and continue on your way. You're just being silly. But the sound comes again, slicing through the trees, and it's louder now, almost as if it's closer. Your feet freeze without your permission. Your heartbeat is in your ears as you stand and listen. For a moment, all is quiet. Then comes the beating of leathery wings. Something is moving between the trees. A silhouette, long and slender. A swan-like neck and a heavy head that seems almost like a goat's or a mule's. You yell, stumbling backwards, and race back in the direction of your car. When you get in and slam the door behind you, the engine starts up again, all by itself. And your phone screen flashes to life with a message saying, "Hey, are you okay?" You can barely type. You're so terrified because you think you've just seen something belonging to legend, and you hardly want to admit it's real. New Jersey, 1735, and life was hard. The area was still a British colony, and it would be another 40 years before the Declaration of Independence was signed. It was only around 40 years since the infamous Salem witch trial took place further north. This was the time of the Quakers and their enormous social influence. It was a time when food had to be farmed with intensive labor, illness avoided at all costs, and death stalked every family step. Nothing was secure, nothing guaranteed. Far from its image today, the area was also extremely rural back then. Superstition and belief in magic still prevailed. The era of the Enlightenment had arrived, but hadn't quite taken hold there yet. A woman known as Mother Leeds is where our story really begins. She had already borne 12 children. Exhausted, worked to the bone, and hearing that she was pregnant with a 13th child, she cried out in frustration, "Let it be a devil." She was pregnant with a 13th child. She cried out in frustration, "Let it be a devil." The upper average for kids back then was around 10 per family. So you can understand that this lady was done, over it majorly. People who heard her words cautioned her against such language. The woods around them, the vast pine barrens, carried all kinds of evil and mysterious magic, and it wasn't impossible that a devil might hear and grant her wish. Grant her wish it did. When the child was finally born, Mother Leeds screamed and writhed beneath the careful hands of the midwives. As they eased out the infant, they saw that something was horribly wrong. Instead of tiny hands and a round, soft-hair tuft head, there were slick, leathery wings, an animal's head, clawed hands, and a bird's body, and cloven hooves instead of feet. The midwife screamed, dropping the newborn to the blood-soaked hay, where it screeched and bleated in distress. Mother Leeds called out again and again, demanding to know what was wrong. But before anyone could answer, the creature shook off its wings and darted towards the chimney and disappeared. One account says it devoured the midwives and Mother Leeds, tearing flesh and crushing bone, even sucking up its own umbilical cord and gnawing on its own placenta, before escaping to the woods. And if you think that version is gnarly, there are much, much worse ones. So be thankful I spared you the version where the baby transformed from soft pink child to terrible monster before the mother's eyes. Needless to say, the noises are described in graphic detail. So what can we find of Mother Leeds? Well, there are records of a woman who lived in Burlington, New Jersey, and she did give birth to 12 children between 1704 and 1726. Her name was Deborah Leeds, and her husband was called Japheth. Japheth's dad was a man called Daniel Leeds. Daniel arrived in colonial America from England in 1677. And in 1687, he started publishing an almanac, a sort of general information annual pamphlet, which included a section all about astrology. Astrology these days is super sanitized and widely accepted. But back then, in the Quaker community, it was seen as ungodly, sinful even. They didn't like that he used the pagan-sounding word March, for example, rather than the more commonly used number of the month. And they even censored and destroyed some of his works. Sometimes he apologized for being a little too out there. Sometimes he ignored his scandalized fellow townspeople. And later he broke away from the Quakers altogether and even started satirizing them. In 1716, Daniel decided to retire, and his son Titan, Deborah's brother-in-law, took over. He changed the almanac's logo to the Leeds family crest, a dragon-like beast called the Wyvern. And what does a wyvern look like? Long snout, leathery wings, clawed feet, which is interesting. Benjamin Franklin. Yes, that Benjamin Franklin, one of the founding fathers of the United States. What happened next was basically an 18th century all-out Twitter war. So we know that the Leeds family, by 1716, had made some enemies, and they were also rumored to mess around with the occult. Well, their feud with Franklin was basically a dispute over ways of thinking. So Franklin was very much a man of the Enlightenment, and is actually known as the father of the American Enlightenment. So he was not a fan of superstition, and would have taken issue with the contents of the Leeds family almanac, what he would think of as backwards or woo-woo. And he also wanted to start a semi-friendly feud as a kind of PR stunt. What better way to gain an audience than to beef with an existing publisher? But things got even stranger when Benjamin Franklin took things a little too far. Titan Leeds was one of Franklin's competitors in the almanac business, and Franklin decided to mock him in a way that feels surprisingly modern. He publicly predicted the exact date of Leeds' death. When that date came, and when with Leeds very much alive, Leeds called Franklin a liar. And Franklin's response? He insisted that Leeds was actually dead, and that the man arguing with him must be an imposter. After all, Franklin joked no living person could have written something as ridiculous as the Leeds Almanac. So what started as a business rivalry had become one of colonial America's strangest public feuds. And this all took place around 1733. And the Jersey Devil is said to have been born in 1735. Titan Leeds did eventually die in 1738. So, with Franklin responsible for this and other superstition-mocking hoaxes, could it be that he is the original creator of the Jersey Devil? One afternoon, he saw mysterious tracks in the woods. Later, he said they were like no animal he knew. Footprints like a two-footed donkey, and with one foot slightly larger than the other. Bonaparte followed the tracks until they suddenly ended, as though the creature had the power of flight. As he stared at the spot, confused, he heard hissing behind him. Turning slowly, just like in a horror movie, he came face to face with a huge winged animal with a horse-like head and legs like a bird's. He stood frozen, unable to shoot even. He surely thought he was about to die and probably be eaten. But for whatever reason, the beast spared him. It hissed once again, then beat its enormous wings and flew off. The next day, Bonaparte told people about this encounter. Ah, they said, so you have met the Jersey Devil. He looked for the tracks again and again, every time he went hunting, but he never met the beast since that first day. People woke up to snowy mornings with unusual hoof-like footprints surrounding their property. The tracks crossed fields, roads, farms, and frozen streams. Some were found on rooftops, where no normal animal could have climbed. Children cowered in their beds as the sound of the hoof prints pounded on the slates above them. Farm animals were found slaughtered, their guts stretching across the glistening white snow like pink and red ribbons. What would it take next? Pets? Children? Then people began to see the beast itself, a winged, terrible creature flying through the night or soaring across the fields in the early morning. People shrank against each other inside, while outside, the creature screamed and howled, sometimes throwing its body against doors and shutters. Newspaper stories exploded everywhere, and each report asked people to come forward with their own stories. Panic spread. Workers refused to go out after dark. Schools closed their doors. Children were kept inside, and armed citizens patrolled the streets. The creature looked at him, and its eyes were cat-like in the light of his headlights. The man said that this was the moment he realized that he had met something monstrous and unnatural. A horse-like face, a bird-like body, but furred like a wolf. And there, by each side, slick wings folded like fans. His heart began racing. He tried to tell himself it was a trick of the light, or that maybe he was tired. But he knew, because he knew the story. It came slithering out from the far reaches of his mind. Surely this could only be the Jersey Devil. Then the thing threw back its head, unhinged its jaw, and screamed. Red globs of spit flew from its mouth, and the sound was like nothing he'd ever heard. Not even in a movie. What made it most frightening of all was that it was almost human, like the thing was trying to sound like a human. What happened next would go on to haunt him.
This police officer recalls one of the most horrifying calls he's ever gotten, and it's because he still doesn't know what he encountered that night. So Officer Bradley retired from the force about 10 years ago at the ripe age of 50. And in the 20 years that he was a police officer, this story has always stuck with him. It was January 17th, 2005, and 911 had gotten a call of a woman who was trapped in her bathroom because her boyfriend was trying to kill her. So him and his partner Mason arrived at the house at the end of the street. The clouds were thick and the air was ice cold. So they went up to the front door and they knocked and they yelled, "Police, open up." And the only sound was wind chimes. After a little bit of time, Mason ended up kicking in the door with all of his force. Once they entered the house, they scanned downstairs and there was no one. And that's exactly where the woman said she was. Then Officer Bradley said, "Do you hear that?" And Mason looked upstairs, and you could hear gentle cries coming from upstairs, but they sounded muffled, almost like they were behind a door. So Mason says, I swear she was supposed to be downstairs, but they kind of just shrug and they start making their way up the stairs. So they shout out, "Ma'am, you're okay. It's safe, no one's gonna hurt you." But then the crying stopped. And it stopped so abruptly, like someone hit pause. Then it started up again, and you could hear a voice say, "But he's still here," from behind the door. So Officer Bradley says, "Ma'am, we checked the entire house. Don't worry, no one is here, you're safe." Then suddenly downstairs, the front door slams shut. So Officer Bradley and Mason just look at each other. He gestures for Mason to go and check. So he goes over to the banister, looks over, and he could see the front door, and it's shut now. But he figures maybe it was just the wind. Then from the other side of the door, the voice says, "Are you sure, Officer Bradley?" That entire night, not one of them used each other's names. So there is no way that this woman would have known that. So then Mason says, "Ma'am, do you need help or not?" And because he's agitated at this point. Then he says, "We need to know right now. Can you step back from the door because I'm gonna kick it in?" Officer Bradley says that he's pretty sure it was just Mason's curiosity that got the better of him wanting to kick in that door. But he tells Mason, no, hold on. She might be sitting up against the door, so, don't do that. Then the voice on the other side of the door says, "Officer Bradley, tell Mason if he kicks in this door, I'm gonna visit his family in the late hours of the night and kick in a door of my own." But they swear that the voice was like an octave deeper than it was before. Now he says that he's never understood the expression white as a ghost until that night, because the look on Mason's face was pure terror. And so he kicks in the door. And when they got inside that bathroom, there was nobody in it. And there was no point of exit anywhere. There was no windows or other doors or anything for someone to get out of. And yet they were both certain that they had just had a full conversation with a woman on the other side of this door. So they scanned the entire house. They looked in every inch of this place, even in the backyard, and there was nothing. No one. Officer Bradley says him and his partner Mason communicated non-verbally for the rest of the night. They just kind of gave each other side glances because they were both so scared. Now this is the part of the story that Officer Bradley has never told anyone, not even Mason. He was sufficiently disturbed and couldn't even drive back, so Officer Bradley ended up driving them back to the station. When they were leaving that street, Mason could not even look back at that house. But Officer Bradley did, and he really wishes he hadn't. He looked back and squinted, and he realized that there was something by the garbage can. It looked like somebody knelt down, a dark, shadowy figure watching them leave. And as they drove further and further away from the house, and the house became more and more distant, that figure stood up. And he swears to this day that that figure did not stop rising until its head peeked over that 2-story house. Thank you for listening to today's story on Explore Paranormal. As always, I'm Jason. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about this story, and give me a follow if you liked it, because I tell stories like this all the time. And I will see you guys on the next one. Bye.
So I can't be the only person that believes that if you see something the government doesn't want you to, there's going to be consequences. Did y'all hear what happened to them 2 men out in Pinchcott National Forest? Because I find it weird what happened to these 2 men considering they were very experienced hikers. 2 men, ages 37 and 59, decided to go take a hike out in Pinchcott National Forest on the search for a Sasquatch. Now they were only supposed to be gone for 3 days, but their families reported them missing when they didn't come home on Sunday. Their bodies were found so deep into these woods that there was over 60 volunteers and multiple aircrafts, including drones, helicopters, airplanes, on the search for these two men. And there has been so many reported sightings of Sasquatches and other cryptids out in that forest that they actually came up with a law that if you harm one, you will get a $1,000 fine. So as reported, these men were supposed to be on a 3-day camping trip and hike looking for a Sasquatch. And like I said before, they did not return home and their families called in the search. Oddly enough, when their bodies were found, it was reported that the cause of death was unidentified at first. Then the autopsy shows that their cause of death was actually apparently natural causes. They claim that they couldn't handle the weather conditions. I don't know about you guys, but I find that extremely weird considering these men have been years and years of experience of hiking under their belts, but they were on a mission. They were on a quest to go find the so said Sasquatch, and I find it really strange that these guys just ended up dead and they couldn't find they couldn't figure out what unalived them at first, and then autopsy shows that 2 experienced hikers couldn't handle the weather conditions. Even their families are saying that this whole scenario is very odd. There has been many reports made that they think that they saw something and the government, you know, had to do their job and cover it up. You think about it, 2 very experienced hikers go out in the woods, see something they're not supposed to, and then you're telling me the weather is what unalived them? Both of them were very prepared for this trip, and I just find it really strange. And like I said, even their families are feeling very skeptical about this. But you guys tell me what you think down in the comments. Do you think it was really natural causes, or do you think they saw something they shouldn't have?
A Reddit user posted this picture after finding a hidden house sealed inside of his attic. They first posted about it back in 2020, but for some reason, I'm just now hearing about this. In their initial post, they explained that the building used to be a 2-story shop where the shop owners used to live upstairs and the shop was downstairs. Well, the building was then converted into a church where they then sealed the old upstairs portion of the building off and just built a new addition around it. So then the Reddit user living there is left with this, an abandoned 2nd-story space that has been completely sealed off from the rest of the house for God knows how long, and also completely stuck in time. Now, a lot of people in the comments were speculating that when this was turned into a church, this was most likely the pastor's apartment, which some say makes it even creepier. While exploring, they found a second hatch in the ceiling, suggesting that there's another attic attached to the 2nd-story room. But the user couldn't get into it without using the ladder to get back down, and when they said they would go inside and post updates, they never posted on the Reddit thread again.
I did. What? Oh my god. What? Are we? It just... No, are we crazy? No, it's gone. Wait. No, listen.
If you've ever wondered if you have walked into an alternate dimension, you just did when you were able to see this car. For a lot of us, it probably took a moment to actually see which car they were referring to. If you have been working on your intuition for a while, if you have been building it, go back, look at it, and allow yourself to step into that dimension. That's a parallel dimension. That is not just a ghost car. And if you're coming into your intuition, you're still learning about it, open the eyes, close the eyes, go into meditation, and you will feel yourself moving into an alternate dimension that is still happening. Don't stay there. As much as you want to, don't stay there. It's important that we talk about this because as a group, those of us that are feeling the shift energetically, we're going to see more and more situations like this where you're being introduced to alternate dimensions, taking our consciousness up, rising it above and beyond just psychic ability, and now moving ourselves into other dimensions, past lives, future lives, alternate lives, running simultaneously. Use this as a learning tool. Join us on Patreon if this is new for you and you want to get into it a lot deeper. This is something you can use as a practice to bring yourself in and out of dimensions. Be careful doing the work, obviously. Be cautious. If you need help, you can DM me. If you aren't sure where to begin, you can DM me. Why is this important? Not because I want you to learn how to do tricks with our psychic abilities, but because it's time for us to become aware that alternate realities exist, that parallel dimensions exist, that our past, future, and present lives are all wrapped up in one. And the more that we can tap into that, the more that we can become familiar with it and it becomes normalized for us, the more we raise our consciousness. Remember, raising our consciousness isn't just about what I refer to sometimes as party tricks, psychic ability, seeing the future. That's not what raising your consciousness is. That's part of it. That's part of who we are. We all have these psychic skill sets, but raising your consciousness is about you learning how to manage the emotional body, learning how to communicate effectively and intuitively with others, learning how to meet people and feel where they've been. So now the conversation is coming from a more compassionate place. You can intuitively understand where they're coming from, and it changes the dynamic. And so this friction that right now so many of us have with other people starts to dissipate a bit, because we are now approaching our relationships from an intuitive place, not just from a, what do you look like? Where do you come from? What is your name? It is from an intuitive place, and that is very different than a surfaced level approach. What is this parallel reality? It almost feels stuck in time a bit. This reality isn't moving, the consciousness isn't being raised. And it's the same time frame as that vehicle, obviously, okay? This vehicle in this, I don't know the year of that car, but in this parallel life, that car is considered new, considered very new and elegant. And the person driving it has a hat on. There's a woman in the seat next to him. This lifetime, there isn't a lot of evolution. They're a little stuck in a sense that lessons aren't being learned karmically. Energetically, people aren't evolving. There's this, there's definitely this party sense. There's definitely this sort of not caring and doing whatever they want, and not really being concerned about others. This is why this group of people are stuck in this dimension, because they refuse to evolve. It's very hard to describe, and it's very hard to interpret what I'm hearing and seeing. So if anyone out there can help, please jump in, because there is a sense of them being stuck and not aging. And there's a lot of them. It's like a whole city of people. I know it sounds crazy, and I don't know that I resolved it much. So I think that's because it's going to engage all of you guys to jump in and share. What are you feeling? What are you seeing? Help us put these pieces together of when we step into these parallel lives. I would just ask you, don't go textbook on me, right? Something you've read, something someone else has regurgitated. Share with me your intuition on how you think this is taking place and how we should experience this. Because when you choose to educate yourself from your intuition, this is where we all raise our vibration, because we're learning from a new space. I'm not saying don't read and don't utilize science and don't utilize the brain. I'm not saying that. I'm saying in this situation, don't regurgitate something someone else has told you. Use your intuition to show you what this is and how we are all supposed to learn and grow from it.
I don't know what's going on in Roanoke Rapids, North Carolina, but it is not safe. They've had more murder cases than most big cities I've been researching. On June 22nd, a relative of mine and his 15-year-old friend and another teenage friend were driving up the road, and for whatever reason, they stopped in Roanoke Rapids. I don't know why, we haven't been told. Roanoke Rapids is about 2 hours from here, but while they were in Roanoke, they were shot dead. both Shane and Mariah. I'm sorry if I mispronounced her name. If you are family or know her, please correct me in the comments. I just found her name yesterday. This case is really confusing because we haven't gotten all the details yet, and I'm not going to sit here and gossip or spread rumors because that's the worst thing you can do in a murder case. You need to wait until the facts come out, and that's what I'm going to do. But all I do know is they were riding together, they stopped in Roanoke Rapids, and that's where they were murdered. Their killer has not been caught. Have no idea who did it, but the point of this video is to show y'all this. Roanoke Rapids is a very dangerous place. These are just some of the cases from the last few months. May 10th, 2025. 2 murders, August 27th, 2025. February 8th, 2026, February 23rd, 2026, June 22nd. That was when Shane and Mariah were murdered. And there are some other cases that aren't popping up. And some of these cases have not been solved. They turn into cold cases. A lot of these cases go unsolved because a majority of people will not come forward and tell the truth about what happened. Apparently, Roanoke Rapids has a serious problem. Some people are saying that there's gang activity and a lot of underage juveniles that are, out of control there. Their police force is just not big enough. They don't have enough funding and they're backlogged. I don't know. Again, I'm not from there. Even if they have a small police force, even if they're backlogged, even if they have no funding, there are people that know what happened and they will not say nothing. But what I can tell you is don't go there. If you are not from there, if you don't know that area, do not go there. Nowhere is safe. We know that. Everywhere around the world can be dangerous. Somebody can break into your house right now. But when you see that clearly, obviously, somewhere is very dangerous, don't even risk it. And listen to me. If you find out that your teenagers are going to Roanoke to hang out with a friend, to pick up a friend, they're going swimming, whatever they say, you stop them. You tell them, hell no, you're not going. Again, I stress to you as parents, do not let your children, your teens, your loved ones go in places like this that they don't know. It's not safe out here. Your teens can't really go anywhere anymore. They can't do anything, and I hate that. That sucks. Because we could do so much when I was a teen. We could drive 2 hours away to the mall and not have to worry about nothing. We go to the river and swim, go to the beach and go fishing. We didn't have to worry about all this danger, but today, it's a whole different story. Shane and Mariah deserve justice. They did not deserve what happened to them. And to the person that killed them, I hope you are caught soon and brought to justice. Because if the police don't catch you, somebody else probably will. I want you to know that Shane and Mariah are loved. They have family who love them and will fight for them, and we will get justice for them.
Might have known the story of real-life boogeyman.
Good afternoon. You join us both in my reading shed that I've turned into a little library, and I thought, well, whilst I'm enjoying some tales this afternoon, I'll regale you lot with one as well. So this one was told to me in about 2016. I'd not long graduated university and was working at a drug and alcohol rehabilitation centre in Rodney Street, Liverpool. Now, it used to run music classes in there where they would teach, ex-offenders and what have you how to play guitar, all this. And one day this fella tells me how he had encountered a coven of witches. So how did this story go? Well, he tells me it happened around 1996. Him and his wife at the time were invited down to a party at a little cottage in Little Crosby. So for anybody who doesn't know that area, it's a sweet little village that, feels like a real step back in time. There's no street lights there. It's all original cottages. It was created for basically a Catholic community to all live together, which makes this tale all the stranger, right? Maybe the coven selected this place so they could be really undetected. Anyway, they were invited to this party. It's in the autumn. It was pretty dark by the time that they arrived. And he said the entire evening the conversation was a little bit odd about phases of the moon and historic topics around witchcraft and sort of things like this. He said he didn't really have anyone else to talk to as the other husbands there were also involved in this general chit chat. And then came the topic a little bit more sinister, in which there was a local politician that the group quite clearly didn't like at the time, and they were plotting together on how to cast spells on him. So of course he just thought these women are crazy, do you know what I mean? He thought they're all bloody bonkers. And anyway, that's how the story went up until then. Making his excuses, he asked if he could go and use the bathroom. So up he climbs to the top of the staircase in this little cottage, and he notices in one of the bedrooms the door is slightly ajar. So he peeks his head in. I'd do the same, I'd have a good nose as well. Peeks his head in and sees a room that has a massive pentagram drawn on the wall. Now, behind the bedroom door is a large purple cloak as well. So he's moving everything, having a little look around, as you do, and finds a photograph by this lady's bedside who was hosting the party. And he recognises almost all of the faces to be the women downstairs, adjourned in these big purple cloaks and are stood around a bonfire in what looks like woodland. But what unsettles him most of all, his wife is one of the ladies stood there. He doesn't know anything about this, by the way, at this point. So, feeling a bit unsettled, excuse me, Pumpkin, feeling a bit unsettled, he makes his excuses, goes downstairs and tells his wife he's not feeling so good, and subsequently the two leave, much to her annoyance. But the weird thing about this is he completely forgets that the two of them have ever been there, initially anyway. One day, he's changing out his old shoes, the ones he likes to wear every day, and finds at the bottom this little unusual charm. Now, he said it's a symbol like nothing he's ever seen before. All he could compare it to was that of an old Egyptian hieroglyphic or something like that. So anyway, he removes this charm, and suddenly all the memories of his attendance at the witches' gathering that evening at the cottage come flooding back, and he realises upon speaking to his wife, she's the one who planted the charm there. She doesn't admit this, of course, but he knows just from speaking to her that she did this, and she's involved in something rather dark. Other things apparently went on in the relationship after this that were signalling something was getting worse, and she was involved with these women a little darker than she was making out. All witches aren't evil, right? We know that to be the modern sense. However, he does believe to this day there was indeed something sinister about this particular group of witches.